What if I told you that learning English is not something that has to take years, not something that has to feel slow, confusing, or overwhelming, but something that can begin to transform your life in just 30 days?
Not because you suddenly become perfect, not because you learn every word or every grammar rule, but because something inside you shifts. Something powerful, something that changes the way you see the language, and more importantly, the way you see yourself.
Because that's the truth most people don't hear. Learning English is not just about the language. It's about confidence, identity, and the belief that you are capable of expressing yourself in a completely new way.
And today, we're not going to talk about theory or complicated methods. We're going to share a real story, a personal journey, how we began learning English in just 30 days, and how those 30 days changed everything.
And if you're listening right now, maybe feeling stuck, maybe feeling like you've been trying for a long time without seeing real progress, I want you to stay with us. Because what we're about to share might completely change the way you approach learning.
I remember the moment when I decided to take English seriously, and it wasn't a big dramatic moment. It was actually very quiet, very personal. I was sitting alone, trying to understand a simple video in English, and I realized something that made me feel both frustrated and determined at the same time.
What was it?
I realized that I had been learning English for years, but I still couldn't use it in real life. I could recognize words and understand some sentences, but when it came to speaking or thinking in English, I felt completely stuck.
That feeling is so familiar for so many learners. Knowing something, but not being able to use it.
Exactly. And in that moment, I asked myself a very honest question. What if the problem is not the language, but the way I'm learning it?
That's such a powerful question because it shifts your focus from frustration to curiosity.
Yes, and that question became the beginning of my 30-day journey. Not to become perfect, but to finally feel progress, real, visible, emotional progress.
I had a similar moment, but mine came from a different place. It came from embarrassment.
What happened?
I was in a situation where I needed to speak English, and even though I understood what was being said, I couldn't respond the way I wanted to. And that moment stayed with me. Not because anyone judged me, but because I felt like I couldn't express myself.
That feeling can be very strong.
It was. And later that day, I kept thinking about it, replaying the moment in my mind, imagining what I could have said, how I could have responded. And that's when I realized I didn't just want to learn English anymore. I wanted to live it.
That's such an important shift from learning to living.
Yes, because learning can sometimes stay passive, but living the language means using it, feeling it, making it part of your daily life.
So what did you decide?
I decided to give myself 30 days, not to become fluent, but to change my relationship with English, to stop being afraid of it and start engaging with it every single day.
That's exactly what I did too. And what's interesting is that those 30 days were not about studying harder. They were about studying differently.
And that's where everything begins.
Because most people think they need more time, more books, more rules, but sometimes what you really need is a different approach,
A more personal approach
a more active approach.
and a more consistent approach.
I remember the first day of my 30-day journey very clearly because instead of opening a textbook, I did something completely different.
What did you do?
I started listening, not to learn every word, not to understand everything perfectly, but just to get familiar with the sound of the language.
That's such an underrated step.
Yes, because before you speak a language, you need to feel comfortable hearing it.
And what did that feel like at the beginning?
Honestly, confusing. I didn't understand everything. I've missed a lot of words, but instead of getting frustrated, I reminded myself that this is normal.
That mindset is so important.
Yes, because if you expect to understand everything from the beginning, you will feel discouraged very quickly.
But if you allow yourself to not understand everything, you create space to learn.
Exactly, and slowly, without forcing it, I began to recognize patterns, common words, familiar sounds.
I did something similar, but I added a small twist.
What was it?
I started repeating what I heard, even if I didn't fully understand it.
That's a powerful technique.
Yes, because it helped me get used to speaking, not just listening.
And how did that feel?
At first, a little strange because I wasn't used to speaking out loud alone, but after a few days, it started to feel natural.
That's the key. Repetition creates familiarity.
And familiarity creates confidence.
I also made one important decision during those 30 days. I decided to stop translating everything into my native language.
That's a big step.
Yes, because translation was slowing me down. It was creating a delay between thinking and speaking.
So, what did you do instead?
I started thinking in simple English, even if it was basic, even if it wasn't perfect.
That must have felt challenging at first.
It did, but it also felt freeing because I was no longer trying to convert every sentence in my mind.
I had the same experience, and I remember one moment very clearly. I was walking outside and I started describing what I saw in English. Just simple things like the sky is clear, people are walking, the weather feels nice.
That's a great exercise.
Yes, and in that moment, I realized that English was no longer just something I studied, it was something I could use
And that realization is very powerful.
because it changes how you see the language
From something distant,
to something personal.
and once that shift happens, learning becomes more natural.
I think one of the most important things we both did during those 30 days was consistency.
Yes, not intensity, consistency.
We didn't study for hours and hours in one day and then stop for a week.
We did something every single day, even if it was small.
And those small daily actions created momentum.
And that momentum made it easier to continue.
I also remember how emotional this journey felt at times.
In what way?
There were moments of excitement when I understood something new, moments of frustration when I felt stuck, and moments of surprise when I realized I could say something I couldn't say before.
That emotional connection is very important.
Yes, because it makes the experience real, not just mechanical.
And when something feels real, you stay connected to it.
So, if you're listening right now and you're wondering if 30 days can really make a difference, I want you to understand something very clearly.
It's not about becoming perfect in 30 days. It's about becoming different.
Different in how you think,
Different in how you practice.
different in how you see yourself as a learner.
And that's where everything begins.
Once those first few days passed, something very interesting started to happen. And it wasn't something dramatic or sudden, but it was noticeable in a quiet, almost surprising way. English started to feel a little less distant.
Yes, and that feeling is very important because in the beginning, a new language often feels like something outside of you, something unfamiliar, something that doesn't belong to your daily life.
But when you start interacting with it every day, even in small ways, it slowly begins to feel closer, more natural, more connected to you.
I remember around the fifth or sixth day, I noticed that I was recognizing more words without trying so hard, like my brain was slowly adjusting to the patterns of the language.
That's a beautiful stage because it shows that learning is happening, even if you don't feel like you're studying in a traditional way.
Exactly, and that's when I realized something very important. Consistency is more powerful than intensity.
Yes, because when you do something every day, your brain starts to adapt. It starts to expect it, and learning becomes part of your routine instead of something you have to force.
And once it becomes part of your routine, it feels lighter, less stressful, more natural.
I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to do too much at once, thinking that more effort will bring faster results.
But often, that creates pressure and leads to burnout.
Exactly. And during my 30-day journey, I made a conscious decision to keep things simple and manageable.
What did that look like for you?
Instead of trying to learn everything, I focused on understanding and using a small number of words and phrases really well.
That's such a smart approach.
Because language is not about how many words you know. It's about how well you can use the word you already know.
I did something similar, but I added a personal element to it.
What do you mean?
I started learning phrases that were directly connected to my daily life, my thoughts, my routines, instead of random vocabulary that I might never use.
That makes a huge difference.
Yes, because when the language is connected to your real life, it becomes meaningful. And when something is meaningful, it's easier to remember and use.
I remember one small habit that helped me a lot during those days. I started talking to myself in English.
That's one of the most powerful habits.
Yes, and at first it felt a little unusual, but I kept it very simple, just describing what I was doing, what I was thinking, or even what I was planning to do next.
And how did that help you?
It removed the fear of speaking because there was no one there to judge me. No pressure, no expectations.
That's so important, especially in the beginning.
Yes, because fear often comes from external pressure, and when you remove that pressure, you create a safe space to practice.
I had a similar experience when I started recording my voice.
That can be challenging.
It was, especially the first time I listened to my own voice in English. I felt uncomfortable. I noticed every mistake, every hesitation.
That's a very common reaction.
Yes, but instead of avoiding it, I decided to continue because I realized that this discomfort was actually helping me grow.
And over time?
Over time, I became more comfortable, not because my English became perfect, but because I became less critical of myself.
That's such an important shift from criticism to acceptance.
Because when you accept where you are, you create space to improve.
I think another turning point for me came around the second week when I started noticing that I could understand more without translating.
That's a big milestone.
Yes, because it felt like my brain was starting to process English directly instead of going through my native language first.
And that makes everything faster and more natural.
Exactly. And that gave me a sense of progress, which motivated me to continue.
Motivation is so important, but I think what matters even more is building a system that doesn't depend on motivation.
That's a great point.
Because motivation can come and go, but habits stay.
And during those 30 days, we were not just learning English, we were building habits.
Habits what made English a part of our daily life.
Like listening every day, speaking every day, thinking in English whenever possible.
And those habits created a strong foundation.
I also remember how important it was to keep the learning process enjoyable.
Yes, because if it feels like a burden, it becomes difficult to stay consistent.
So I chose content that I actually enjoyed. Videos, conversations, topics that interested me.
That makes a huge difference because when you enjoy what you're doing, you naturally spend more time with it.
And that time adds up.
I think one of the biggest emotional moments for me came when I realized that I could express a complete thought in English without stopping.
That's a beautiful moment.
Yes, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't complex, but it was mine and it felt real.
And that feeling stays with you.
It does, because it shows you that you're capable, that you're moving forward.
And once you feel that, even once, it changes your mindset.
You stop thinking, I can't do this, and you start thinking, maybe I can.
And that maybe is very powerful.
Because it opens the door to possibility.
I think that's what those 30 days really gave us. Not perfection, not fluency, but belief.
Belief in ourselves.
Belief that progress is possible.
And belief that we can actually use the language, not just learn it.
And if you're listening right now, I want you to understand something very clearly.
You don't need a perfect plan to start.
You don't need to know everything in advance.
You just need to begin.
And stay consistent.
Because those small daily efforts
Will slowly transform the way you learn.
and the way you see yourself.
And that's where real progress begins.
As the days continued, something deeper began to change. Not just in what I could understand or say, but in how I felt when I used English. Because in the beginning, every sentence felt like a test, like something I had to get right. But slowly, that pressure started to fade.
Yes, and that's such an important stage because when the pressure begins to disappear even a little, your mind becomes more open, more flexible, and learning becomes easier.
I remember one evening very clearly. I was sitting alone, thinking about my day, and without realizing it, I started thinking in English. Not perfectly, not in full sentences, but in simple, natural thoughts.
That's the big moment.
It really was, because it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like practice. It just happened.
And that shows that the language is starting to become part of you.
Yes, and when that happens, something shifts inside you, because you stop seeing English as something separate from your life.
It becomes part of your daily thinking.
Exactly. And that made me feel more connected to the language, less afraid of it.
I had a similar experience, but for me, it came during a conversation.
What happened?
I was speaking with someone, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about every word before I said it. I was just responding, naturally, even if it wasn't perfect.
That must have felt amazing.
It did, because I realized that I didn't need to control everything. I could just trust myself.
And that trust is something you build slowly.
Yes, through repetition, through small successes, through showing up every day.
I think one of the biggest breakthroughs during those 30 days was realizing that I didn't need to understand everything to feel progress.
That's a very important point.
Because in the beginning, I used to feel frustrated if I didn't understand every word, every sentence, every detail.
That's very common.
But then I started focusing on understanding the general meaning, the main idea, and suddenly everything felt easier.
Because you remove the pressure of perfection.
Exactly, and that allowed me to stay engaged instead of feeling discouraged.
I think there's something many learners need to hear. You don't need to understand everything to improve.
You just need to stay consistent and keep exposing yourself to the language.
And over time, your understanding naturally grows.
Another thing that helped me a lot was repeating content, not just once, but multiple times.
That's a powerful technique.
Yes, because the first time I would understand very little, the second time a bit more, and by the third or fourth time, I could recognize patterns, phrases, and meanings more clearly.
That repetition builds familiarity.
And familiarity builds confidence.
I also noticed my pronunciation started improving, not because I was studying it directly, but because I was listening and repeating regularly.
That's the natural way of learning.
Yes, because when you hear something enough times, your brain begins to imitate it automatically.
I remember practicing simple sentences out loud over and over again until they felt natural, until I didn't have to think about them anymore.
And that's how fluency begins.
Not with complex sentences.
But with simple ones that you can use confidently.
I think one of the most emotional parts of this journey was realizing that I was no longer afraid to try.
That's a huge shift.
Yes, because in the beginning I was afraid of making mistakes, of sounding wrong, of not being understood.
And what changed?
I started focusing more on communication than correctness.
That's the key.
Because once I focused on expressing my ideas instead of making perfect sentences, everything became easier.
And people still understood you.
Yes, and that gave me confidence because I realized that perfection is not necessary for communication.
That's such an important lesson.
I also noticed that I was becoming more patient with myself.
That's not easy.
No, but it's necessary because learning a language is a process and expecting instant results only creates frustration.
And frustration can stop you from continuing.
Exactly. But when you accept that progress takes time, you become more relaxed, more consistent.
I think that's what made the biggest difference during those 30 days. Not just what we did, but how we approached it.
With curiosity instead of pressure.
With consistency instead of intensity.
And with acceptance instead of criticism.
And those small mindset shifts created big results.
I also remember how motivating it felt to see small improvements, like understanding a sentence I didn't understand before, or being able to express a thought more clearly.
Those small wins are very powerful.
Yes, because they remind you that you're moving forward, even if the progress feels slow.
And that keeps you going.
I think one of the most important things to understand is that those 30 days were not about reaching a final goal.
But about building a foundation.
A foundation of habits.
A foundation of confidence.
And foundation of belief.
Belief that you can learn.
Belief that you can improve.
And belief that you can actually use the language.
And once you have that foundation, everything else becomes easier.
Because now you're not starting from zero anymore.
You're building on something real.
And that's what makes the journey sustainable.
So, if you're listening right now and you feel like progress is slow or you're not where you want to be yet,
remember this.
Every small step matters.
Every effort counts.
And every day you show up,
you are getting closer.
Even if you don't see it immediately.
Because real progress
is happening quietly.
In the background.
And one day, you'll notice it.
And realize how far you've come.
As the final stretch of those 30 days approached, something even deeper started to settle in. Something that went beyond techniques or habits. It was a sense of ownership, a feeling that English was no longer something I was chasing, but something I was beginning to carry with me.
Yes, and that feeling is very emotional in a quiet way because you start to realize that all those small efforts, all those simple daily actions, were not just exercises. They were building something real inside you.
I remember one particular day when I didn't feel motivated at all. I felt tired, distracted, and honestly, a part of me wanted to skip my practice. But I still decided to do something small.
What did you do?
I just listened to a short conversation in English and repeated a few lines. Nothing intense, nothing perfect, but I showed up.
And that matters more than we often realize.
Exactly, because that day taught me something very important. Discipline is not about doing everything perfectly. It's about continuing even when you don't feel like it.
That's such a powerful lesson, not just for learning English, but for anything in life.
Yes, and during those 30 days, I started to understand that motivation comes and goes, but consistency creates results.
I had a similar experience, especially during the third week when the initial excitement started to fade and things felt a bit repetitive.
That's a critical moment.
It really is, because that's when many people stop. They feel like they're not progressing fast enough, or they lose interest.
So what helped you continue?
I reminded myself why I started, not just to learn English, but to express myself, to feel confident, to connect with others. And that deeper connection gave me the strength to keep going.
That emotional connection is very important.
Yes, because when your goal is meaningful, you don't give up easily.
I also started noticing that I was becoming more comfortable with not knowing everything.
That's a big shift.
Yes, because in the beginning, I wanted to understand every word, every sentence, but now I was okay with partial understanding.
And that made the process lighter.
Exactly, because I stopped putting so much pressure on myself.
I think one of the most surprising moments for me came when I realized that I was actually enjoying the process.
That's beautiful.
Yes, because at first it felt like something I had to do, but over time it became something I wanted to do.
And that's when learning to become sustainable.
Exactly, because when you enjoy something, you naturally stay consistent.
I also remember having my first real conversation where I didn't feel overwhelmed.
What was different about it?
I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just focusing on sharing my thoughts.
And how did that feel?
It felt natural, almost effortless. And even though I made mistakes, I didn't feel embarrassed.
That's such an important moment.
Yes, because it showed me that confidence is not about being perfect. It's about being comfortable with yourself.
I had a similar moment when I realized that I no longer paused as much while speaking.
That's a clear sign of progress.
Yes, because my mind was no longer trying to translate everything. It was starting to think directly in English.
And that makes speaking much smoother.
Exactly, and it made me feel more connected to the language.
I think another important realization during those days was understanding that progress is not always visible.
That's so true.
There were days when I felt like I wasn't improving, like I was repeating the same things. But when I looked back, I could see how much it changed.
That's why reflection is so important.
Yes, because it helps you see the progress that you might not notice in the moment.
I also started to appreciate the small moments more, like understanding a joke, catching a phrase in a conversation, or expressing an idea clearly.
Those moments are very meaningful,
Because they remind you that you are moving forward.
and they build confidence in a very natural way.
I think one of the most important lessons from those 30 days was this. You don't need perfect conditions to learn.
That's a powerful truth.
You don't need hours of free time, expensive courses, or a perfect environment.
You just need consistency and intention,
And a willingness to try,
even when it feels uncomfortable,
even when it feels slow.
because those small, imperfect efforts create real change.
And over time, they build something strong and lasting.
I think by the end of those 30 days, what changed the most wasn't just our English,
But our mindset,
the way we approached learning,
the way we saw ourselves,
and the way we handled challenges.
because we were no longer afraid of making mistakes.
We were no longer waiting to feel ready,
We were simply showing up and doing our best.
and that made all the difference.
So if you're listening right now and you feel like your journey is slow or uncertain,
Remember this,
you don't need to be perfect,
you just need to keep going.
because every small step you take,
It's bringing you closer to where you want to be,
even if you can't see it yet,
because growth
is happening one day at a time. And when those 30 days finally came to an end, it didn't feel like a finish line, it felt like a beginning. A quiet but powerful realization that something inside me had changed, not just in the way I understood English, but in the way I believed in myself.
Yes, because if you look at it honestly, 30 days is not enough to master a language, but it is enough to completely transform your mindset, your habits, and your relationship with learning.
And that's exactly what happened, because I was no longer the same person who felt afraid to speak, who hesitated before every sentence, who doubted every word.
Instead, you became someone who was willing to try, willing to speak, willing to make mistakes, and still continue.
And that willingness made all the difference, because once you remove that fear, even partially, everything else becomes easier.
I remember reflecting on my own journey at the end of those 30 days, and I asked myself a very simple question. What has really changed?
And what was your answer?
It wasn't just vocabulary, it wasn't just listening skills, it was confidence, the quiet confidence that I could understand more than before, express more than before, and most importantly, continue improving.
That kind of confidence is very different from perfection.
Yes, because it doesn't come from knowing everything, it comes from trusting yourself.
I think one of the most emotional realizations for me was understanding that progress doesn't always look the way we expect it to.
That's so true.
At the beginning, I thought progress would mean speaking fluently, understanding everything, feeling completely comfortable. But instead, it looked like small moments. Moments where I tried, moments where I improved a little, moments where I didn't give up.
And those moments are what truly matter.
Yes, because they build something deeper than just skill. They build resilience.
And that resilience is what keeps you going even after those 30 days.
Exactly, because this journey doesn't end here, it continues. But now it feels different.
Now it feels possible.
Now it feels real.
And most importantly, now it feels like something you can actually enjoy.
I also realized something very simple but very powerful. I didn't need to wait anymore.
Wait for what?
To feel ready, to feel confident, to feel perfect. Because I understood that those feelings come after action, not before.
That's one of the most important lessons anyone can learn.
Yes, and it applies not just to learning English, but to so many areas of life.
I think another important thing to understand is that your journey will be different from ours, and that's okay.
Yes, because everyone learns in their own way, at their own pace, with their own challenges.
But the core idea remains the same: consistency, patience, and the courage to keep going.
Even when it feels slow.
Even when it feels difficult.
Even when you doubt yourself.
Because those are the moments that matter the most.
I think if I could go back and tell myself one thing before starting those 30 days, it would be this.
What would you say?
Don't be afraid to begin imperfectly, because that's the only way you'll ever improve.
That's such a powerful message.
And I think it's something every learner needs to hear.
Because fear often stops people before they even start.
Or it slows them down so much that they lose confidence.
But once you move past that fear, even a little, everything changes.
You start to see progress.
You start to feel more comfortable.
And you start to believe in yourself.
And that belief is what carries you forward.
So, if you're listening right now and you're wondering if you can do this, if you can really improve your English, if you can really become confident,
The answer is yes.
not because it's easy,
But because it's possible.
and because you are capable of more than you think,
All it takes is a decision, a small decision to start.
and a commitment to continue,
One day at a time,
one sentence at a time.
one step at a time.
And before you realize it, you'll look back and see how far you've come.
And you'll understand that those 30 days were not just about learning English,
They were about changing your mindset
building your confidence.
and discovering your voice.
So if you're listening right now and you're wondering if you can do this, if you can really improve your English, if you can really become confident,
The answer is yes,
not because it's easy,
but because it's possible.
and because you are capable of more than you think,
All it takes is a decision, a small decision, to start.
and a commitment to continue,
One day at a time,
one sentence at a time.
one step at a time.
And before you realize it, you'll look back and see how far you've come.
And you'll understand that those 30 days were not just about learning English,
They were about changing your mindset
building your confidence.
and discovering your voice.
So take that first step today.
Start small, but start.
And if this conversation inspired you, if it made you think differently about your journey, then don't keep it to yourself.
Like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel for more conversations like this.
Because we're here to support you, to guide you, and to remind you that you're not alone in this.
This is Emma, and this is Daniel.
And no matter where you are right now,
Keep going.
because your voice matters.